Last week, we discussed the collective mind, and today we will learn about the collective self-observer as part of our curriculum for developing a consciousness that can help us emerge from our current death spiral. First, let us consider self-observation. Self-observation, or the ability to step back and reflect on one's internal experience, is integral to psychotherapeutic healing. Having its origins in Freudian times, this capacity is sometimes called the observing ego. The observing self brings insight, emotional regulation, and ultimately psychological transformation. One of the goals of psychotherapy is to cultivate a curiosity toward one's thoughts, feelings, and defenses, from which an individual can gain the ability to recognize and modify maladaptive patterns that were previously unconscious and automatic. Psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud thought that the ego had a dual function. One part engaged in immediate experience and the other in observing, analyzing, and controlling impulses. In his book, The Ego and the Id, he highlighted the importance of strengthening this observing function in psychotherapy. Patients would learn to recognize unconscious conflicts and begin the process of working through them. Freud believed that by observing one's own mental processes, repressed material could gradually move into conscious awareness, enabling insight and change. Freud's daughter, Anna Freud, refined this concept in The Ego and the Mechanisms of Defense, emphasizing the observing ego's role in recognizing defenses such as repression, projection, and denial. Once patients become aware of these mechanisms, they could choose better coping strategies. This encouraged patients to observe themselves actively. These methods developed into ego psychology and self-psychology, which use the ego for modulating internal drives as well as external reality. The concept was later expanded with object relations theory and patient-centered therapy, where the observation of an empathic therapist allows patients to feel safe enough to examine painful parts of themselves. In this manner, self-observation is central to healing by creating a reflective space between impulse and action. Patients learn the origins of their emotional reactions and consciously respond rather than unconsciously react, which gives them new choices for behavior and emotion. Over time, this reflective capacity fosters greater self-compassion and integration, allowing previously split off or disowned parts of the self to be acknowledged and transformed. It is in this context that I came across the work of Dr. Bernard Beitman, who shared with me excerpts from a book he's currently writing, Psychotherapy for Humanity. So you can imagine how my heart leaped. His work is very similar to the work I am currently doing around psychotherapy for the globe. So I decided to invite him for next week to join me for a dialogue we can all take part in. In his book, he describes the concept of the collective self-observer as a potential turning point in human consciousness, much like the Renaissance shift toward individual self-awareness. The collective self-observer is envisioned as a vantage point from which humanity can observe, analyze, and intentionally guide its collective mind, fostering a new level of cognitive and moral evolution. This potential awakening has parallels with historical precedents, spiritual insights, and current social crises. The Renaissance marked humanity's first major leap in self-awareness from medieval authoritarianism. On April 26, 1336, Francesco Petrarch climbed Mont Ventoux, where a serendipitous reading of St. Augustine's Confessions shifted his focus from external nature to the inner self. His writings inspired others, seeding the Renaissance ideal of self-reflection. Here's a sample quote from Augustine. "And men go about to wonder at the heights of the mountains and the mighty waves of the sea, and the wide sweep of rivers and the circuits of the ocean, and the revolution of the stars, but themselves they consider not. Dr. Beitman likens the synchronistic event to the current threshold humanity faces. Just as Petrarch's personal insight catalyzed cultural transformation, similar synchronicities have now heralded a transition from isolated individual consciousness to a shared collective mind. The collective self-observer is described as a dynamic awareness system functioning like the Earth's ionosphere, expanding and contracting in response to the flux of human thought. It is not localized in any single place or person, but emerges from interconnected individuals capable of self-reflection and empathy. According to Dr. Beitman, we are moving to the next stage of evolution, where humanity recognizes its own mind as an interconnected whole. Could synchronicity once again be signaling a threshold shift in human awareness? The individual minds forming the collective self-observer will have broad perspectives on the collective mind and collective heart. They will feel love and compassion for all living creatures, including Earth and Gaia. To coalesce into a collective self-observer, they will need strong interpersonal skills. Each contributor will have ideas, motivation, and experience, but how the pattern they know so well can be changed for the better. Their diversity ensures coverage of all areas, from economic injustice to spiritual stagnation. Over time, a meta-collective self-observer may emerge to monitor and improve the collective self-observer's internal functioning. Dr. Beitman frames the collective self-observer as operating in a cyclical system of three functions. The self-observer monitors global narratives, tracking cultural trends, crises, and synchronistic events. The self-analyzer identifies systemic issues, archetypal patterns, and emotional trends, translating these observations into strategic insights. Finally, the self-initiator mobilizes intentional collective action, guiding cultural, social, and ecological transformation. This threefold feedback loop mirrors the psychological self-observation of an individual, scaled to humanity as a whole. Synchronicity plays a crucial role in this emerging collective intelligence. Just as an individual experiences psychological growth through meaningful coincidences, collective synchronicities, such as simultaneous technological breakthroughs, global protest movements, or spontaneous shifts in moral values, serve as signals of an emerging collective awareness. The collective self-observer harnesses these events to align humanity with deeper evolutionary currents. Dr. Beitman also discusses current crises as moral tests of collective self-awareness. The Notre Dame fire in 2019 is described as symbolic of cultural and ecological neglect, a warning akin to setting Gaia on fire. Authoritarian regressions, such as the hypothetical 2025 suspension of habeas corpus under the Trump administration, are contrasted with foundational principles of justice embodied in the Magna Carta, which established the principle of due process. Additionally, dystopian warnings drawn from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale are used to highlight the risks of religious extremism and the erosion of reproductive rights, especially in light of the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade. These examples underscore the urgency of cultivating a collective capacity of self-awareness and correcting maladaptive trends. The collective self-observer allows for humanity's therapy, a process similar to psychotherapy, but scaled to the species. This transition mirrors the Renaissance shift from obedience to inquiry, but now involves recognition of humanity's deep interconnection with the Gaia sphere, or Earth systems, the psychosphere, or shared psychological field, and the noosphere, or collective thought layer. Strengthening the collective self-observer is therefore both an emergent evolutionary capacity and a moral responsibility. Without it, humanity risks repeating cycles of ecological devastation, authoritarianism, and social fragmentation. Dr. Beitman and I agree that strengthening the collective self-observer is urgent. Without it, humanity risks self-annihilation. By cultivating love, compassion, and deep systemic insight, individuals can contribute to a collective intelligence capable of guiding humanity out of the current crises.